Hey guys, this is the application, I'm calling it Tournament Tracker, for the software security class here at DSU, and this is for Team 3. So, to get to the server, you're going to go to 97.71.64.77. That is my server at a static IP address, and when you go there, you should get a page that looks like this. Now, if you're new, you're going to want to register, so you're going to click Register Now, and I'm going to be guest all the way down, basically. Username, first name, last name, guest@guest.com. The password is going to be guest123, and the password again is guest123. I'm going to create the account, and look, we're at the user page. I'm user/2. The first user is me again. It's the admin. So now, when you sign out and you come back to the page and you've already been here, you've registered and all that, you're going to want to click Login. You click Login, you'll come to this sign-in page where it'll ask for your username and your password. So I'm going to type those three in. And we get back to the page that we saw earlier. Now, we're going to sign out one more time, and just to demonstrate that when you're not signed out, that you cannot go back, we know that we're user/2. So I'm going to go ahead and try, and we come back to the sign-in page. Now it says please sign in, indicating to us that we are not signed in. We are trying to get in illegally. And now this is very good because you don't want someone else taking control of your profile. How I did this exactly, we'll see later. Alright, so when we're new to this tournament, we have four options basically. We can join a tournament, which there's no tournaments yet. We can play a tournament. You're not registered for any tournaments yet. And we can create a tournament, and this is a very nice page. So we are going to call this tournament Tournament 1, and this is what I call the short name. Now I'm going to set the registration time starting yesterday and ending tomorrow. Now today for me is really the 8th, but for some reason my server thinks it is the 9th. Anyways, so I'm just going to surround the 9th with 8 and 10 just so we can see it actually work. I've verified that it doesn't work, that it doesn't show the tournament to register if the registration dates are, if your date is not within the two registration dates. Now we can select a difficulty. This is a random number. This is really just for the human player. And then there's some rounds, and they behave like the registration. Okay. I just left the rounds as the default because there's a lot of them. Now we can join a tournament, and when you say join tournament, you see all the tournaments that are eligible to join at the moment. Now we can see Tournament 1, that's the short name. We can see the the difficulty, 52, the duration, which is 30, and then the ID in the database. Every row in the database will have a unique ID, starting at 1 and heading up to who knows where. When I delete a entry from the database, that number does not get reclaimed. I have to blow away the database to get back to number 1. So I'm going to click join, and it says I'm successfully added to the tournament. So I'm going to go back. Now, I don't have anything preventing you from joining more than once. I probably should, but when you go to play, it shows you all the tournaments that you are currently registered for. So if I join a second time, I should see 2. And sure enough, I do, and they are identical. So I'm going to click 1, and we see that we show up twice. In fact, you're going to be playing yourself at the very first round. So this really doesn't affect anything. Now if there's any empty spaces in the tournament, I fill them with computer players just so the humans that are playing know they're not really playing the humans, so there's no point in getting upset. Alright. Now let's go over the code. So the way that Rails works is it's run on a model view controller layout. So when you submit something on the web page, it goes to the controller, which does all its work. It calls the models, and then it renders the views, which you see. So we are going to start off at the models just because there's one of them that's really being used, and it's very short. Alright, every model inherits from active record. This allows you to use the database without having to write any SQL. Instead of saying find, where, star, whatever the SQL is, I can say user.find_by, pass the key like ID, and then the number that I want to find, so 2. And it will find every user, or it will find the very first user that has the ID of 2. Because ID is a unique primary key, I'm guaranteed to only find one user with that ID. It might not be true for some other keys, but for the primary key it is guaranteed. Alright, so when I'm about to create a user, before I do anything, before I save it, I create the email as lowercase. I validate that the first name is there and that it is no longer than 50 characters, and I do the same thing for the last name. For the username, I verify that it is there, so you do have a username. It is no longer than 50 characters, and it is unique. It would really suck to have 3 people with the same username and the same password. You would always be on one user account, and you would never be able to do anything on your own by yourself. Valid email regex is my regular expression for comparing emails. I figured out the exact pattern on Rubular, an application on the internet, and it allows you to do that in real time. I validate the email, make sure that it is there, and make sure that it matches the email format, so yahoo.com, guest@yahoo.com, me@gmail.com, etc., etc. And make sure it's no longer than 50 characters. Even very long emails like mine do not reach this, so you should be fine. And make sure that it is unique. You don't want a hacker getting someone's email, re-registering, putting the same username in, and blowing away their old saved data. Has secure password is a built-in Rails function. It takes the password and encrypts it. Now the password travels over clear text through the lines, so there's still the possibility of a man-in-the-middle attack, which I will address later in the video. But for this portion, it secures it when it stores it into the database by encrypting it. And then I make sure that the password confirmation is there, because we don't want you mistyping your password once. We want you to mistype it twice, so that way you'll never be able to get in, but we know that you did it twice in a row. And we make sure that it is no shorter than 6 characters. And we only check one of them, because honestly, if your password confirmation is 7 characters and your password is 6, they pretty much don't match. If you're lucky and you get the same hash, then you're lucky. If you don't, then that's what it's meant to do. These other functions are for the sessions, and I didn't really create them, I just kind of stole them from someone else. So I don't really know what they do. Now on to the controllers, which is where the fun stuff happens. So we're going to start off again with the users. Okay. The controllers always inherit from application controller. What it does, I don't know. I have a feeling that it has something to do with the routing and interacting with the views, but I'm not 100% certain. I'm only 90%. Okay, before it does anything, that's what the before action does. I make sure that the user is both signed in and correct. If they are signed in and correct, they are the only people allowed to go to the edit, update, and show pages related to the user. Now, this makes sense because we don't want to prevent new users from signing up, but we want to prevent hackers and thieves from getting into someone else's account without having a password and a username. So we saw that earlier when we logged out and then we tried to go back to our old page and it wouldn't let us. That's exactly what caught it. Okay, this new function, and that's when you sign up. All I do is create a blank user, and when you press submit, I come down here to create, and I fill it with all those parameters that you filled in the form. If the save is successful or there's no errors and it saves, then I redirect you back to the home page, which you saw. Otherwise, I redirect you back to the sign up page. And okay, so when I redirect you back to your home page, that is the show. I find the user with your ID. and I stored it in a variable and I send it out to the view. And let's see, user params down here in the private section. I'll go over this later in the tournaments because I use it 2 or 3 times, one other time there, and they both have the same idea. Down here, signed in user and correct user, these are determining if the user is signed in and if he's correct. It makes use of the session helper, which we'll go over later. Let's go over the tournaments now. Alright, so just like user, I have a new function. I have a show, which shows all the tournaments that the user is currently registered for. So as we saw, we were registered twice for the same tournament. And I have it set up that way because I needed something easy to test. I didn't want to be signing in and out of 20 different users. I only wanted one user to test. This is for displaying the brackets. I pull the tournament that you're playing in, and I render the brackets in the view. Add is where I add people to the tournament. Create, I can create a new tournament exactly like the create and users. And then the rest of these functions are not really used. I just have them there as stubs. Down here, tournament params in the private section. This is exactly like the parameters in the user that I said I would get to later. What this does is it prevents post requests. So say in my user, if I have an admin field and users by default are registered as not admins, well, someone that's very intelligent would find out, hey, I can send a post request saying my username, my last name, my first name, my email, my password, and I can say that I'm an admin now. By having this require and permit, I require that only these things are allowed to go through. So he can post admin, and I'll just drop it off. It'll never get through. So it's a good piece of security that we found. And now the sessions controller. So we know that HTTP by itself is sessionless or stateless. That means it can't remember what it sent, who it sent it to. So that's what our sessions are for. It helps with the cookies. It allows you to sign in, it allows you to sign out, it allows you to do all that stuff. So create and destroy. Create allows you to sign in, really. So what I do is when you sign in, you fill out that form, the username and the password. I find the user that has the username that you posted, and I pull them out into a variable. I pull that entire row out. Now, I take the session password, I take the password that you entered, I encrypt it in the same way that I encrypted the password when you signed up, and I compare them. If they're identical, you signed in. 99% of the time, it's the correct password. And if you signed in correctly, I redirect you back to your home page. Otherwise, I redirect you back to the same page and show you an error. Now, the question is, how do I make sure that whenever you encrypt it, that it's always going to become the same? So say my password is me. I encrypt it one way the first time and I encrypt it the second way the second time. It's the same password. So, database, I have this field called remember token, and that is the salt that I use to encrypt. But unless you know both the password and the method that I'm using to encrypt it, you're pretty much not going to get the same result that I am. So it's pretty safe. The destroy function down here is what allows you to sign out. It destroys your cookie and it redirects you back to the very home page where you can register or sign in. Okay, so that was all of those. We're going to go to the helpers, and I did something wrong. Alright. If you can see down here, I have a helper for every controller in the project. Rails generates these automatically. The only one that I'm actually using is the sessions helper. And there's a whole bunch of functions that I took from someone else that help manage cookies. And these are global to everyone, basically. Anyone can call them. You don't have to have the sessions helper class. They're global. Alright, so let's go to the views. and I'm going to look at one. Did it again. I'm going to look at one file just to give you guys an idea. All right. So in Rails, I can have the model, the view, and the controller. Now, in ordinary languages, the view would be static HTML. Oops, how did that get there? Alright, but in Rails, I can embed process codes. So, as you see in this tag down here, the form 4, there's a %equal. That means, the % means run this Ruby code. The equal says render it. So, I have this form that I render with text fields and password fields. A text field is where you can type and see the characters. A password field is where you can type and not see the characters, like little circles or stars. And you'll notice they all have that embedded Ruby thing, the %equal. So Ruby goes through and generates the HTML code for me later on. I don't know what well, actually I do know what it generates, but I don't really care. All I know is that it generates the appropriate HTML to render it if I have the appropriate Ruby code. The submit button creates a submit button. It automatically calls create of that. It calls create of the controller that you're currently in. So this is user. So it would call the create function in user. So, and then down here there's the end. I don't actually render end, so there's no equal sign. And that is the basics of embedded Ruby. So up to this point, I have been just showing pages. So like I can go to tournament/play or tournament/join, and and Rails automatically knows what to do. And so how does it do that? Well, that's the router. So in the router, I can say resources, which uses the post method to generate the routes. I can also say which routes I want it to generate out of the post. So I can restrict it to, like, say, new, create, and destroy for the sessions. I can tell the router what my default homepage is. So when you just type in the static IP address, it goes to that homepage automatically. That's here in the router too. And I can match up an arbitrary URL, so tournament/show. I can match it to any class and any function in that class via any HTTP verb. So most of these are get, just because of the way it works. There's a delete up here, and then the resources generate generate some like post and the rest of the verbs. I didn't really have a need to use any other verbs besides get, delete, and post. So that's why I did that. Now, as I said earlier, the passwords are transmitted in clear text for now. Our solution to that was to use SSL, which is to encrypt the communication stream. So we take the packet that's going from my server to them, and I encrypt it, and then I send it on its way. Well, the problem that we had was that we don't have a valid SSL certificate, so you could never log in. It makes it very secure. It also makes it very worthless. So I commented out that line in the configuration file. So if we ever do get a valid certificate, we will be ready to go and secure the communication string between the two. And that is the entire project.